In the last video, we built a sketch of the city as it would be in the year 1600. For a quick recap, Persepone is a city in a fictional world that has a history very similar to the history of Europe. Basically, it's based around an island inside a large river. This island has been designated by the church as a sanctuary place, and so it attracted people, all kind of people seeking sanctuary, and with the centuries it just became a main city. And by the year 1600 it's a decently sized city, relatively at the footprint of what we see here. This video, the goal is to bring it from the year 1600 to the year 1800 and see what extensions and changes these centuries will bring. And overall, the main plan for the city is first to build a very rough sketch of how it would develop historically, and after that to start building the city with more detail and with a few iterations to change things and really to give enough depth and attention to every part of the city. So it's a bit of a non-conformal way of building a city, but I think this will be fun. So let's begin building what we built today. First of all, we left here in the previous episode an empty kind of hill for a king castle. So let's quickly put some buildings here to like hold the space for a king castle. So for now, we are just throwing in a few things, only like to remind ourselves and to like visually kind of help us imagine that this hill holds a king castle. Okay, so next let's go for the development that a city would go through between the years 1600 and 1800. And well, maybe one of the most dominant additions to the city will be a set of better walls. Around the year 1600, the armies would start to use cannons powered by gunpowder, and this would make the old walls kind of obsolete because the cannons would just break them easily. So cities would start building newer and more modern fortifications with wider walls and star-shaped castles that would allow the defenders to kind of defend from every direction and defend against enemies that hug the wall just beneath the wall. So let's see a few examples and then we will build fortifications around Persepone. So this is a partial map of Rome in the 1700s, and we can see around the city the star fort. We can see the characteristic star shaped with like the points of the stars coming outwards. We can see it here along the border of the city, and these fortifications would usually be very large compared to the older walls from the medieval era, and they would usually cover more than the city itself. So even in this example of Rome, we can see that between the end of the city and the fortifications, we have some sort of farmlands. We can see many plantations and orchards in this specific example. And this was a characteristic of these fortifications, where they usually would enclose more space than the space that was built. And this was from a thought that cities need more space inside the walls. And people at that time already realized that the cities would grow. And building fortifications is very expensive. So the fortifications would need to contain more space for city expansion. Here we can see another example from 1752 of the city of Köln or Cologne along the Rhine River. And as you can see, the star fortifications are encircling an area that is much larger than the city itself. And once again, between the city and the fortifications, we can see that it's mostly plantations. And we can see some streets or roads crossing it, and this dotted means built area. So the area along the roads would be built, but then after one line of houses, we are out in the plantations. And of course, outside the city, we have only farmlands. Well, mostly. In some cities, which will be overflowing, the spread of the city would also extend to beyond the walls, but not in this example, and let's see one last example. This is a map of Prague in the year 1766, and once again we can see the same pattern. So we can see the star fortifications kind of encircling more than the built area. We can see star fortifications on both sides of the river. We can see kind of a more central fort just in the place where the river itself meets, in the place where the fort meets the river to protect from the river. And inside the fortifications themselves, we can see that not all the area is built. We can see lots of gardens and farms in the space that's left. And this space would fill slowly as the time goes by. But if you take a snapshot sometime in the 1700s, then we will find empty space inside the walls. Let's build walls for Persepone. We can extend this part to a star fortification like the one we saw in Prague. And let's kind of sketch the path of where the wall would go. We don't want it too large and we don't want it too little. So maybe we will enclose all of this area. Actually, maybe we should start from the fort here and extend it along the fort and then create this kind of larger circle around the city. Here, since we have some development, we can include more space and then connect over here. So this will be the outline of the walls. Let's build the walls. So we have this Beijing walls, which are slightly wider than the Great Wall. So this could play the role of star fortifications, I believe. So let's build it. And over here on the edge of Market Island, we can build the last stretch of the fortifications. Maybe something like this. Okay, great. So that's a sketch of the fortifications. Now, next thing, we will have to decide where the gates are, and then start creating roads connecting the gates to the inner city. And then we wait before we fill them with additional expansion, because there are a few other things that we may want to build inside the walls once we establish where the gates and the roads are. Is it weird to have the gate just next to the excursion, or I don't know how to call it? Let's put the gates in the middle of the sections. So remove this gate and create a gate here in the middle of the section. Another one in the middle here, and another one in the middle here. So here and move it to the middle, and probably the last one here. Now let's delete all the old roads that don't go through the gates. And now create the roads that go through the gates towards the city. So one in here already exists. One in here. One in here. This one can connect to this road. Okay, nice. And now we can make some of the roads going through the inside the second set of walls. And maybe a road from this intersection to this intersection. Okay, nice. So that's almost sets about the star fortifications. Now there's one small thing that we can add if we want. So in some cases, like in the case of Paris here, so they would add a ditch or a trench with water just along the fortifications to the extent that the terrain would allow. So I actually think adding a trench now can be turned into some nice things later in the history of the city. Let's add a trench, at least a partial trench. So now that we have the trench, we can start adding more characteristics of a 1700, 1800 city to this city. So what changed between the medieval ages and the, let's say, 1700s in regards to what we have in cities and how do cities look like? So one big difference is people started building gardens and palaces much more. As we can see here in the map of Paris, we can see here these gardens that today are the gardens in front of the Louvre and the beginning of the famous Boulevard Champs-Élysées. And we can see that the gardens are there already in the 1700s. Here we can see a picture of the palace or the gardens of Versailles in the vicinity of Paris. So we can see that people really have started paying attention to beauty, to symmetry, and really to how things look like from the perspective of a person and which kind of aesthetic or rather any kind of impression it would leave. Kings and all kinds of nobles and royal people started exhibiting their prestige by building fancy gardens and fancy buildings. This is also a time where the neoclassical architecture takes place, where people start getting inspired by the Greek and Roman legacies and try to build buildings that have similar elements, similar architectural elements to those found in ancient Rome and Greece. We can even see this in this fence here on the balustrade, and here on the Greek or Roman columns, we can see the use of arcs. And here is another view of the Palace of Versailles. So we can see that it has once again a grand garden with these ponds and even what seems to be like fountains, and this big long building with very large facade that exhibits wealth and prestige. Here is another example of the Capitoline Hill in Rome. Once again, we can see this very grand facade of stairs leading to a very fancy square with many statues and embellishments and buildings in a neoclassical style. See once again ponds. And one more feature of this time is that the city boulevards, they would start to make them wider and larger, really thinking about how pleasant it would be to walk there. So we can see here once again in Paris, example of boulevards that are wide. They are lined with trees, and really I guess the precursors of the boulevards of today. Here is another example of such boulevard. Okay, so let's incorporate some of these ideas into the city of Persepone. So over here, I think it would be nice to extend the king castle into some royal gardens. So let's say that, can this building work? Okay, so this one looks royal enough, like the examples that we saw. What if they extended the trench into an artificial lake in front of this building? Okay, nice. So we have this lake and palace very close to the old palace. Now maybe we can extend this one to a boulevard that would go straight over here until it ends in some kind of statue and lines of trees. Nice. So we have the first neoclassical palace and the first boulevard of the city. Let's extend the gardens to this lot as well. Okay, nice. So now we have some kind of garden in here. And I think maybe we can make this corner here. Let's say that it is a hill. So let's make all of this area taller. And now we can add a castle on top. Well, the castle looks pretty small. Yeah, these towers make absolutely zero sense, but okay, now that looks just terrible. So let's delete this and maybe just make it a castle by putting walls around it, and then maybe some kind of a barracks building. Can delete these towers as well. So I dropped a few buildings in here. I don't think it looks too good, so maybe in the end we can just remove the buildings and leave this empty, or maybe search some references for how these forts would look like. But the main idea is that this is a hill with cliffs and we have fort, and in the future this will allow for us to to develop some very nice things in this area. I think with the hill here, hill there, and the gardens and the lake in the middle, this area already looks more interesting and has some more potential. So here is another picture of Paris from the year 1734, and we can see these boulevards along the river and along the trench here, and it looks like it's also along the fortifications. So let's see if we can build some boulevards like this one in our city as well. So all of this side is already kind of built. Now, of course, I can't destroy these buildings, but like if we play the game of historical development, then it would be much easier to build the boulevard on the side that is still empty. So let's just build some kind of a boulevard. And since this gate is obsolete, we can destroy this gate and maybe create another boulevard that would go from the river to the gardens. So here we have this other boulevard just along the old walls beneath the, I guess, the private garden of the king's castle, leading from this new pond to the river. And here we have another boulevard along the river. Actually, we can add some kind of key here. So we completed this boulevard here along the river, and I think soon we will maybe want an additional bridge, because one bridge would probably not hold all the traffic as the city grows. But let's first maybe grow the city now that we have placed some palaces and gardens. So I believe this half of the city can be populated with buildings. So let's do that. So the most of this quarter has filled up, and in the remaining, I guess, spots along the main boulevard, I believe this place would be reserved for either palaces or more important buildings. Let's put some bigger buildings along the boulevards, and we can even use these buildings. Like, the nice feature about them is that they have this like arc colonnade, and they are very good for kind of boulevards that would have been intentionally planned. And like, we can imagine that the rulers of the city would kind of dictate how the buildings along the important boulevards would look. So we are just going to have these uniform buildings along the main boulevards. Let's build some for the other side and a few more. And yeah, let's put some more unique buildings around this square. And then we will have some minor, lesser roads coming out of it, connecting to this street. And some fancy buildings along the street here. So should we continue the trend of this building? Let's continue the trend until the end. And sometimes in real cities, this like special boulevard buildings would really cut into the like more organic blocks of the city, so that one side of the building would be the regularized type of building and the other would be the regular city block building. So this is kind of what we try to capture here. Also, we can tear down part of the wall here because this wall is not necessary anymore, as well as this gate. And maybe this place can become some kind of square. So actually, let's delete this corner of the wall and make this into a square. And maybe we can drop this fountain in this square. Make the fountain pretty large so that it's actually seen from a distance. And let's surround the square with some more buildings. And let's extend the palace to kind of fill all the block here. And maybe we will have some gardens in here. So can this do as a temporary garden? And yeah, I'm placing some palm trees because my inspiration right now is like kind of a Spanish Mediterranean, maybe some Italian influences, and maybe even more influences from around the Mediterranean or the southern part of Europe. So yeah, palm trees would not be an uncommon sight in gardens like in Spain. Yeah, let's put even another line of palm trees and here. So next thing, I would like to create more city expansion towards this side of the city. So we can see that we already have some relatively dense expansion of the city in this area. So let's keep this dense, let's make this a dense neighborhood all the way to the gate and a little bit around this road that goes from this gate to that gate. Okay, nice. So we expanded the southern part of the city. We can see that like the most of the density and development is along this road, which would probably be quite a busy road at this point because it leads from this gate all the way to the like city center. In the areas between, so the expansion is mainly along the main road where the land between them remains countryside. So we can imagine that it's plantations and orchards and these kinds of things. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the expansion. And like maybe in the future, this area will become kind of the poor side of the city. It's also the side that is opposite to the side of the castle and all of the garden and the more fancy buildings. So this side can be the poor side of the city, and especially in the next video when we will do the industrial revolution. So I think this side can be a good side to build some industries and the slums that will come to accompany these industries. So yeah, that's a plan for the future. I think the thing that's missing is a few more churches and cathedrals because these were and probably still are today very common in European cities. So all of this, like a quarter of the city, doesn't have a church at all. So let's see if we have an asset that could play this role. So this church from France would be nice. We want it next to a main intersection, so maybe we can put it here because this seems to be the most important intersection of this quarter. Maybe we can place it, I guess, like this. So let's delete all of the existing buildings. Okay, nice. So that's one church. Let's put another one maybe here next to the gate. This could be a central place. Yes, so this is another church. And let's use this road just to create some kind of a square. Okay, nice. And we probably want to connect it to the city center. So maybe a main road here, and then it can also connect to this main street. And let's see, we have one more church that we haven't used yet. So I guess around this old gate can be a place for a church. So this can become a square as well. Let's make it a little bit more dark. And that's another square. Okay, nice. And then maybe one last thing for today is just like we saw in France. Let's see if we can find it. Yes. So here we have these boulevards along the what may have been walls or fortifications at some point. So let's create these boulevards along the walls, at least maybe up from here to here. And yeah, this could be a walkway and a garden for the people of the city to exhibit the wealth of the rulers of the city. Let's delete all the buildings. These are the last ones, so we will put some kind of a medium tree, something like this. Okay, nice. It's not really important because, well, the next centuries are going to change the city anyway. But I think this is a good point to end, and we kind of reached the year 1800. And in the next stage, we are going to do 1800 to 1900. So that's the Industrial Revolution. So this will introduce some big changes. Mainly, we're going to build new industrial zones. Probably we will build some kind of harbor, maybe on this side of the city. And of course, introduce the first railways to the city and do some expansion because generally cities doubled or tripled or maybe even more, increased their size even more during the 19th century. This was really I think the first century where cities really started to explode in their size. So all of that is the plans for the next video. Maybe we will just finish this with giving some names to the areas so that we can better orient ourselves. We will give this quarter the name of Poor City. So this little area will get the name North Fort. Maybe we can extend this North Fort to include some of the city blocks. So if this is the King Castle, let's call it New Palace City. New Palace City. And these two areas remain. So let's name this area by this square. So it has a fountain in it. So we will call this the Fountain City because there is a fountain at the corner of it. Fountain City. And one last quarter of the city. Let's call it the other quarter. And this I will probably tear down and turn into some industry, so no point in naming it. Well, I guess that's it for the year 1800, and next time we will do the 19th century.